My name's Andrew Bartolini, and what I'm going to talk about for the next 20 minutes or so are the key strategies that Chief Procurement Officers are going to utilize to drive growth and performance over the next 5 years. So, quick little background on myself and some of the context of where these strategies came from. So, I'm the Chief Research Officer at Ardent Partners, which is a boutique research and analyst firm based in Boston that specializes in supply management, so specializes in the source-to-settle process. I guess two points of context. For those of you that enjoy today's topic and the themes that we talk about today, I welcome you to go visit CPO Rising, which is the media site that my firm publishes, which really looks at the challenges and opportunities and the stories of Chief Procurement Officers today. Also, over the past 5 years, I've actually benchmarked, surveyed, interviewed, and worked with thousands of distinct procurement organizations. In that time, I've also interviewed and worked with and had conversations with hundreds of distinct chief procurement officers. So what I'm presenting today are some of those best ideas drawn from that work over the past 5 or 6 years. So, quiz to the audience and those of you at home, who is it that said these quotes? So these are public quotes, and by who said it, I don't mean necessarily what's the name of the person, but think about the job role of someone in your organization who's focused on managing costs, renegotiating contracts, looking at operational efficiencies, and managing inventory, right? Now, it makes sense for a chief procurement officer to be thinking about that, right? Or those of you that are here or online that work in procurement or supply management. May make sense for somebody in the supply chain to make a comment like this. The reality is that today, and really for the past couple of years, more and more executives are focused on issues and activities that fall under procurement's responsibilities, right? So, interesting trend that really started in the days of the global recession. And I started listening to earnings calls of publicly traded companies, and in environments, so end of 2008 into 2009, when these quotes were given, organizations realized that their opportunities to drive revenue growth were muted, and they saw that some of the largest opportunities that their organizations had were in controlling the things that they could in fact control. And these are effectively procurement-led initiatives, so starting to frame the success of their organizations in the context of procurement success. So it's not just CEOs who started to pay attention or more attention to procurement over the past couple of years. CFOs as well. If you were to look sort of historically where CFOs have focused their efforts, right? So on the growth side, on the stock price side, on communicating corporate strategy to the investor community and to the constituency, what we've seen has been a shift in those priorities, right? So an interview of more than 150 CFOs over 2 time periods, we see that the focus has shifted to managing cash and managing and operating much more efficiently. So as we come through a recession, or maybe we've come through the recession, maybe we haven't, I'm not really sure what your opinion on that may be, but whether the CFO starts to then focus again on growth and profits, whether the CEO also starts looking at other initiatives that drive growth, there's a lot of learnings, there's a lot of successes over the past couple of years that these executives aren't just going to put to the side, right? Successful organizations are able to multitask. And so the lessons that were learned over the past couple of years, that procurement can deliver value, can really drive value, can defend profit margins, is something that is going to be carried forward. So increasingly, we see more and more executives that are at least open for engagement. And key strategy number 1 is engage your executive team. And so I've got a chart behind me that I want to walk you through and really highlight why CEOs, why CFOs, why other executives are talking more and more about procurement, why more and more CPOs are being appointed into organizations. So what you see behind me is a graph that shows the amount of revenue that's required based upon a company's profit margin to drive $1 million in profit. So for companies that operate at a 10% profit margins, right, so a nice profit margin, it takes them $10 million in revenue to translate into $1 million in profit. For companies that are operating with tighter margins, it takes $33 million, or more than $33 million if you're operating at a 3% profit margin, to generate $1 million in bottom line profit. So I ask all of you here and those of you online to think about what it takes for your organization to sell $33 million of its products and services. Think about the marketing professionals that need to go behind that. Think about the sales professionals. Think about the production and the delivery. All that it takes to go into generating $33 million in revenue. And now for those of you that are in procurement, think about what it takes for your organization to identify and deliver $1 million in savings, right? So $1 million in savings can equate at a bottom line impact to $1 million in revenue. So there's phenomenal, for those of you who understand that discussion, right? There's phenomenal leverage in procurement success. And that's why, one of the reasons why more and more executives are talking about procurement, they're thinking about procurement. So key strategy number one is to engage your executive team, right? So as procurement organizations mature and place more spend under management, they need the support of the executive team to go out and really expand the scope of their operations, to place more spend under their management. Key strategy number one. So I'm going to rewind the clock again and take you back to 2008. And I think everybody here remembers the automotive industry and the challenges that it had then, and actually some of the challenges that it still faces today, right? So the CEOs of the big three flew into DC basically to request bailouts. It's a very difficult time, right? Front page news. You know, GM actually filed for bankruptcy and went into receivership, and we the taxpayers took some of that ownership, right? So front page news. So in that same period of time, I was working with the CPO, the Chief Procurement Officer of a Tier 1 supplier to the automotive industry. This is a company that drove about 15-20% of their total revenues from General Motors. And so in the course of that conversation, he forwarded an email to me that the Chief Procurement Officer of General Motors at the time forwarded to their organization. Basically, so this is April 2009, after the CEOs have been down to DC, after the public debt for these companies basically were, basically indicating these companies were likely to go into bankruptcy. So April, on a Thursday afternoon in April 2009, GM CPO sends out a note that basically says, we're going to ramp down production. We're going to close these plants over a certain period of time. We're going to ramp down production in these other areas. So I'm talking with the CPO, and I say, oh, okay. I mean, that's not a surprise, right? We've all watched CNN. We've all read the newspapers. We've all read the news online. And he replied back that the CEO and chairman of a Tier 1 automotive company, so a company that is driving 20% of their revenues from General Motors, was caught completely off guard by this news, right? So something that, any high schooler who's watched, up to date on current events had a better sense of what was happening in the market than this key supplier, right? And so there are real costs that happen when you do not have the level of communication, a level of trust that can build into a level of collaboration with your suppliers. So key strategy number two is to really begin to drive supplier collaboration and innovation, right? So there is a great quote by the founder, one of the founders of Sun Microsystems. He says that innovation will happen, and it'll happen elsewhere, right? So what that basically says, and it's something that I believe, is that no company has really cornered the market on innovation, right? So unless you believe that your company has cornered the market on innovation, some of the opportunities to drive additional growth, to drive additional performance, exist outside the four walls of your organization, right? Some of the best opportunities actually exist within your supply chain. And so for those of you that are in procurement, those of you that are in sourcing and supply management, those of you that are interacting with suppliers, some of those opportunities have to be identified in the supply chain. And so what often has to happen is you have to actually rethink and create a new environment for how you treat your suppliers. So certainly not all of your suppliers. We're talking about more of the strategic suppliers, the suppliers where those opportunities are more likely to exist. But when you think about the normal conversation that you have with, that a buying organization, that a procurement organization has with its suppliers, it's in the context of a contract, right? Negotiating a contract, setting the SLAs, and executing that contract, coming to agreement on terms. Those discussions can be protracted and difficult, sometimes, but not always. But then as you look at how you manage your supplier relationships, the average procurement organization is managing supplier performance within the context of that contract. And so for opportunities and innovation to be fostered and grown, you need to start having conversations that really look to go beyond or outside the normal framework of the supplier-customer relationship, right? Starting to think of your suppliers as much more as true partners than anything else. And for that to happen, there has to be a level of open communication and a level of open trust. So key strategy number 2 is to really promote supplier collaboration and innovation, to start looking for those opportunities outside the 4 walls of your organization. So a couple of questions for you here, right? So now imagine that you're the CEO of your company, and you call up your CFO, and you ask, well, what's our current ratio? What are our earnings? What would we project our earnings to be this quarter or for the next 12 months? And your CFO said to you, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked. I don't know the answer as I sit here right now, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go run some reports, and in about 6 weeks, come back to you with an answer that I'm not very sure about. That would be unsettling, right? If that was your CFO. Now, consider you then ask your VP of sales. You say, I want to know what the hot markets are. I want to understand where our best opportunities are. Where should we be hiring more salespeople? Where should we be putting more marketing resources? How's our pipeline look? What's our win ratio? Who's our toughest competitors? And the VP of sales says, that's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. I don't know, as I stand here today, what the answers are, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to go run some reports. In about 6 weeks, I'm going to come back to you. I'm going to give you an answer that I'm not really confident in. So then you go to the product team, and I think you get the picture, right? You have the same conversation with your VP of manufacturing. How much does it actually cost to make this product? We're trying to figure out our profitability. Where are we putting our resources? How efficient are we? And the VP of manufacturing says, great question, going to run some reports, come back, answer, not going to be very sure, right? If you're the CEO of that company and you had any answer from any of those 3 professionals, it's unlikely that professional is working for the company the next day, right? If you're the CEO and you get that answer from any of those 3 professionals, it's unlikely, your job is probably at risk too. Now, imagine you're the CEO the CEO and asks your CPO, what are we spending our money on? Who are we spending it with? What's our contract compliance? What should we be sourcing next? Where are the best opportunities to save money? And your CPO said, great questions, give me 6 weeks, I'll give you some answers, I'm not really sure, right? The reality is the first 3 hypotheticals were just that, hypotheticals. In the procurement context, it's anywhere between 25 to 40% of procurement organizations do no level of spend analysis, right? So I'm not talking about fully automated spend analysis, I'm talking about manual spend analysis, trying to understand what they spend their money on. And it's basically impossible for an organization, for a business function, to be strategic without visibility into what it's doing, right? If you are working for a procurement organization and a sourcing organization today that doesn't understand what it's spending and with whom, it's my opinion that you're committing procurement malpractice and that there are phenomenal opportunities to change that and to change that today. Right? So this isn't chastising those of you that aren't doing spend analysis. It's talking about the opportunity to move forward and really begin to do that, right? So how do you get visibility into your spend? How do you get visibility into your processes? It's key strategy number 3, automate your processes, right? So I didn't talk too much about my background, but I've been working in the technology side of the industry since the late 90s when solutions were first brought to market, when e-procurement first came to market, e-sourcing. And there's been a phenomenal amount of innovation over the past 10 to 15 years, right? The solutions today actually do what they say they can do, right? That wasn't the case years ago. The solutions are fairly easy to deploy. They're fairly accessible. Down the road, there's the Institute of Supply Management has their big conference, and there's a huge room, not this size, but a large room of solution providers that all sell solutions. It's a very competitive market, and that has also resulted in is that there's been price competition. So these solutions are now affordable and available for companies really, at the $750 million revenue line and above. If you're a company that's in the $1 billion, $2 billion, $5, $10 billion, the solutions to really automate the entire source to settle process are available on the marketplace, right? So spend analysis, e-sourcing, contract management, e-procurement, and accounts payable automation, which I call e-payables, right? Solutions have much better integrate beyond the functionality. There have been great innovations in integration across the business process. There have been great innovations in actually integrating into back-end systems. So key strategy number 3 is automate your processes. So then, one other, sort of to put hopefully an exclamation point on this point, when you look at the ROIs that are achieved from an investment in supply management solutions, by and large, they're more compelling. You get a faster return than the average investment in a human capital management system, in a financial accounting system. The returns are here. The returns are compelling. You have the executive engagement already. The opportunities now are to really begin to drive and promote visibility to become much more efficient in your processes. Right? So 3 key strategies, right? For those of you that are here, I'll ask, are any of you familiar with spend under management and the measurement of spend under management or that concept? Okay, so I see a few hands raised here. And for those of you at home, spend under management really looks at, or actually the percentage of spend under management refers to the amount of enterprise spend, so the money that's spent on direct materials, indirect materials, services, things like that. It doesn't count payroll, doesn't count taxes and tariffs, but the percentage of that total spend that the procurement organization is managing. Right? The average procurement organization today manages about between 50 and 60% of enterprise spend. So what then is left for them is the more difficult areas of spend, the complex services, the areas where the business is not necessarily really excited to get engaged with procurement and sourcing. So utilize the executive engagement and their focus on the bottom line, on the successes that procurement has, on the phenomenal leverage that procurement has, and use them as a lever to get in to drive and place more spend under management, to get better engagement with the different budget holders. When you look at then, as you start to manage more and more of that spend, and as organizations begin to mature, some of the largest opportunities, again, exist in the supply chain, right? We're coming to a point in time where it's less company versus company in competition, but really supply chain versus supply chain. And for you to begin to start thinking about your key strategic suppliers as partners rather than as service providers, right? This requires a change in the general construct of the relationship and in the thought process that goes into establishing a relationship that helps you as well as helping the supplier, right? Start communicating. Start getting to a point where you can communicate your longer-term goals and objectives to your key suppliers so that they have an orientation outside of just worrying to get you to renew the contract or to upsell you on the current contract. And then finally, right, as you engage your suppliers to expand the scope of your operations, as you start looking for greater value in your supply chain, what you also want to be doing is doing these things more efficiently and more effectively. And the key there really is process automation. So the tools that go across the source to settle process provide visibility into your spend, provide visibility into your process, provide visibility into your performance, and allows you to take resources away from the more tactical activities and start engaging in more strategic activities, whether that's internally or externally. So I'm really right at about my time here. We are going to go to the meeting room right across here for any Q&A for those of you that are here in attendance. For those of you that enjoyed the presentation today, conversations like this are happening on cporising.com, so I welcome you to come there too. Thank you very much.